Welcome back to session 38, and let's review the opening paragraph of the book Dao De Jing. And we start with the Chinese, which says, 道可道，非常道；名可名，非常名。无名，天地之始；有名，万物之母。故常无，以观其妙；常有，以观其徼。此二者，同出异名，同谓之玄。玄而又玄，众妙之门。Now, what does all that mean? We have covered most of it. I guess with my personal take, the very interpretation and translation with my own personal life experience and understanding, the comprehension, arrive at the interpretation and translation I shared with you over the previous 37 sessions. And basically, let's review a little bit there, which is all those universal laws cannot be reduced to the rules for the specifics. Those can be described and defined specifically will stand corrected. And the truth discovery could be observed with the measured changes over the course to identify the evolving and development trend, whereas at the same time, certain truth discoveries actually cannot be quantitatively measured in observation, and it's more intuitively to follow your instinct to feel the differences there. And so that covered 固有 and of course, when the Mother Nature has been around for so zillion years, and the humankind only came into formation way after. So of course, the way we try to name everything as we observe the Mother Nature, obviously came and turned out to be very limited, as our knowledge accumulated so far about the Mother Nature, all the natural phenomena that we observed. And what we're arriving today, the new sentence pretty much wrap up this paragraph as we break and determine, like I said, the Chinese, the classic Chinese literature, pretty much just depends on the individual take to decide where do you break up and make it sentence and paragraphs. So anyway, for this new sentence, which is basically following what we talked about earlier, the previous 37 sessions, the new sentence says, the two ways of truth discoveries, observations, experiences, they appear to be different on the surface, but they're actually the same. American kids, at least at one time, they love to say is the same difference. It does not sound logical in English, but actually in Taoism teaching actually does make a difference, the same difference, right? So that's basically what it is. and I will give you some example, but let me finish up on that sentence. Basically, it says it appears on the surface, they're different, but they're really just the same. It's just they're different in form, but they're actually all the same. And they're same as what? As the magics to observe. It's only different way to observe the magic, but they're all the same magics in the changes while we observe them. And all these magics are basically when you observe them. And, I guess going after the so-called truth, that there is the, door to what is appeared to be mystery, and then you basically chase after and try to find out, is that really just mystery, or could that be truth that actually you could come to the point to define as you discover? But once again, both will end up the same. Why? Let me give you some example, okay? So we know about the Chinese history. The French word for China, I believe, I don't speak French again, okay? It sounds like Xin, which very familiar to Qin, which was the first Chinese empire, unified the entire China. Of course, the pre-Qin period, it was ideally, 6 or 7 different prince states. And, back then, the philosophies, it was very loose environment and stable and peaceful. So all the different schools of philosophy, they coexisted in the discussions while they competed to dominate. And of course, this Taoism and Confucianism and Buddhism, all basically, came from, well, Buddhism, no, I take that back. That's way later when it came from India. But Taoism and Confucianism, they existed before the Qin, the first Chinese empire unified China. Basically that was the environment. And then, Qin unified China and basically destroy the the culture and the history prior to the Qin empire. I guess in a hope that the empire could stay forever. Well, actually, didn't even make it to even the third dynasty of the empire. It pretty much just fell apart I guess at the end of the second dynasty. So before the Qin unified China was basically quite a few different prince states geographically located at different parts of China. But then there was Qin dynasty, or Qin empire. But after Qin, basically replaced by another one and another one and another one, just basically, every single one Chinese empire had its own life cycle span. Really depends on how well they, I guess, took care of the commoners' best interest. Then their life cycle span varied. So what did that mean, being a Chinese back then, right? So you could be a citizen of one prince state with your patriotism, and then your prince state basically just went away, and then replaced by one single empire, and then that empire went away, replaced by another empire, and then another empire, and another empire. Just basically, the history kept repeating itself. So what did all that, defined citizenship of any state or empire mean? When you look at the history over a very, very long period of time, beyond the lifespan of any specific empire, it didn't really mean all that much, right? If you're looking at the historically review over, let's say, a couple of thousand years, it didn't mean all that much. Does it really have to be just, China or Chinese history? Not really. We look at Germany today. Of course, there are different parts of Germany. You have Hamburg, you have Berlin, and you have Munich, right? Different city, different subculture. And do they all feel the same about, each other when it comes to who's German, who represents the German culture? I don't know. I mean, I'm not German, but if you are, you probably could answer that question much better than I do. I was, I had an opportunity observing people when they watch football in Germany, and they were talking about the name of German football team, the players. And then there was this discussion, who's German? It seems like some of the Germans in north part of Germany, they don't necessarily look at Bavarians as German as they are in north. But if you ask the Bavarians, they probably have different opinion about the German in the north part of the country too. And I don't know how the people in Berlin feel about the Bavarians, or even, for that matter, the people in in Hamburg, right? That's Germany. Because if you trace back, there were somewhere around like 300 little, you can call it prince states or whatever states. They were not unified. Same with what is considered Italy today, right? Back then there were at least 3 republics, right? The Venetia and the, I forgot what else. But anyway, 3 of them, right? And of course today. And then you look at Netherlands, right? Before there was a unified Netherlands, there were what they call the unified 9 provinces over the low, I don't even know the word, what they call. But, there was no unified Netherlands for, quite a while in history. So when you have this patriotism designed to be, specifically proud of certain state, now that designation certainly will not last too long. If you, look at, the, I guess, historical period, beyond 1,000 years, that may or may not mean that much, right? But in the meantime, today, if you're proud of a certain, sports team of your own city, that's a sense of belonging. I don't know if that's patriotism, but that actually does mean something. It's like when you ride a motorcycle in street, at least in the United States, we ride on the right side of the road, and then on the other side, the oncoming traffic from the other direction, you see another motorcycle rider. Both will simultaneously reach it, the left hand out, as a kind of like a greeting solution, kind of like a riders, if you will. That sounds a little, but anyway, hey, what does that offer? For me personally, that's just a sense of belonging. It had nothing to do with any patriotism at all. But the whole point of, this analogy cited here is you can define, certain, I guess, state sponsorship, if you will, right? So today, we know in the United Nations, the People's of Republic of China is representing China, right? But then I also pointed out earlier, the Chinese, contemporary Chinese, are using the Western calendar every day, and they don't even mark the traditional Chinese holidays, important historical events, and celebrate with their traditional, styled clothing, or their wedding or their funeral ceremonial events. They don't, right? And then, what about the traditional values of, let's say, Confucianism or Taoism? Or you look at the way that, the cities in, across the country in China, the architectures, how much is left there, or built, or, to preserve in respect of the old tradition of the Chinese civilization? We don't know that. I mean, it's pretty hard to find the evidence there, right? Yes, legally, United Nations and a lot of the countries around the world recognize China as the state representing China, the People's Republic of China. But how much the Chinese is in the Chinese today, like I pointed out probably earlier, you go around the world, you see the Vietnamese, Korean, the Japanese, the Cambodians, and all the Asian countries, they have their, little either church or shrines or temples, built wherever, the immigrants resettle down, and, basically around their new communities. Do you see that from the mainland Chinese immigrants? No. So what does that mean? That means the traditional Chinese religion no longer play a part in the contemporary Chinese life, daily life anymore. Okay, so supposedly they all grew up in the communist culture. So do you see that they have any, attempt made to celebrate the communist Chinese culture? No, you don't see that either. And then we talk about the communism. When the two Germans invented this idea, and in the library and everything, obviously with a lot time put into the thoughts, right? Put it into a system, and then the Russians took it to practice in their own country and made their own version. Like it or not, that was just history, right? And then the Chinese did, and specifically certain Chinese did, in a certain way, which may or may not have been agreed upon by other Chinese communist leaders. But anyway, it just, became the dominant version of the Chinese communism. And so practiced in the first 30 years they ruled the country, took over the power. And then, of course, 30 years later, and, from that point till now, that's almost 40 years or so, they practiced a little bit different. So what is communism? If you go to Cuba, if you go to North Korea, and then you go to Vietnam, and you compare, it's different, right? So even though, let's say, someone defined the communism, some way, it's all practiced differently, right? But that's not Asian, let alone Chinese. Communism or capitalism, both were westernization for modernization of Asian countries. So some of them took in communism from the West. Some of them took the capitalism from the West. But then you look at the West, right? In Europe, you have the European style or version of socialism, whereas the Chinese claim as socialist as well. Whereas, but of course, the outside world labeled China as state capitalism. Obviously, here in the United States, we have the biggest capitalism as a system. But the way it is being practiced today, quite different from only a few years ago, right? So good, bad, different, basically the point over here is you can define something, and it might work for a little while, but it doesn't take long before it all changes right? So that's something, I guess, hopefully, going back to the point, defined or not defined, they may appear to be different on the, surface in form, but they're really just, the same. And that's, when and where we use the American youngsters, I guess, description, which is the same difference. Okay, so, but to close on this session, I would have to extend to the last two words of the sentence, which is basically all this difference or the same difference basically just offer you the motivation to continue to explore through this either portal or the channel to the mother nature, and to observe with two different approaches for the different I guess way of finding the truth, and hopefully differentiate from the mysteries. And sometimes you may or may not even be able to tell the difference between the truth and the mysteries. And we'll have more on this in the next sessions. Until then, ciao.